Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. Coast to Coast, This Week in America. On Freedom and Revolt, a comparative investigation by Carl Moyler is a book dedicated to all those heroes and heroines who have seen and will see life as a daring adventure to be given in the name of service to humanity, to justice, and to freedom. Albert Camus and Martin Luther King Jr. are two first-class role models who lived out their passions for justice and freedom. Today, they are among the heroes who are well remembered around the world. In the book, Dr. Moyler compares the writings of these two Nobel laureates and international hero scholars. The author was born in Newport News, Virginia, one of 8 children. He currently resides in Dayton, Ohio, a graduate of West Virginia State University in 1954, majoring in foreign languages. He holds a master's degree in French from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, an educational specialist degree from the University of Dayton, and a PhD from Union Institute University in Cincinnati. He's been a high school teacher and principal, as well as a university professor and administrator, also the founder and CEO of a small business, the Don Pablo Academy, for all subjects, tutoring elementary through college. Dr. Moyler has authored 3 other books, and he's our guest on today's program to talk about his newest book on Freedom and Revolt, a comparative investigation. Dr. Moyler, welcome to the program, sir. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
This is a really important book.
Here.
Well, especially at this time, it's an important book to look for heroes like the two that you talk about. And let's go back to the inspiration. What was it that inspired you to write this book and take a look at these two figures?
Well, I first met Camus in college, okay, and then I did a master's degree thesis on him at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. And I was very much impressed with what Camus did and what he said about equality, love, people getting along together, the whole experience that he was involved in as far as a writer is concerned. For an example, I want to read quickly what we say about Camus.
Yes.
The true meaning of Camus' writing came from his life and experiences during World War II and the ravages of those historical times. Camus saw a world that was bleak, uncertain, unjust, war-torn, corrupt, that sanctioned legal murder, approved racism, promoted political persecution and execution. It appears, therefore, that the passions behind Camus' writing were more a product of his times than him belonging to any particular literary alignment, such as existentialism. Okay, that was for Camus. Now, in comparing him with Martin Luther King Jr., the same can be said for Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King's writings emanated from his total experience of growing up black in America. And I'm also black, okay? He had experienced the full measure of indignities that any black person had to endure. No literary movement was necessary to fuel the fire, therefore. The fire had always been there in him being an Afro-American, okay? It was the segregation, discrimination, lynchings, bombings, oppression, fear, injustice, war, and racism that had been tolerated so long and that exploded on the December evening in 1955 when Rosa Parks refused to give her bus seat up to a white man. So that inspired my writing, and as I said before, I did my master's degree thesis on Albert Camus, and Martin Luther King came in later, but I decided just in writing on one man, I wanted to do a comparative investigation into the two of them. And that's how I got into this. And it took a while for me to do it, but I was inspired by it. And, of course, it was a first because no comparison had been made between these two men before. There are many things that have been written, but as far as someone being bold enough to make a comparison, I was the first one to do it. And I was glad I did because I enjoyed my work and I enjoy it now.
Well, and it's such an important message, and we're glad that you did it as well, because this really is an important book on Freedom and Revolt, a comparative investigation by Dr. Carl Moyler. And if you're Googling that, that's Moyler. The book's available at Amazon. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on directly to the book. And it's these two people talk about Nobel Prize winners. They really encouraged people of all ages, didn't they? It wasn't like one group that they were able to deliver a message in a positive way. Their message was well received by people of all ages.
That is correct. I consider it, Mr. Bratton, I consider it a book for the times that we're currently in, especially here in the United States, as far as what these two guys saw as liberation postures is for what we need to do when we have problems such as we have right now.
Yeah, and please call me Rick, because I'm so impressed with what you've done in the books and the message that you have in this particular book. And human relations is so important. Talk about these two men and the attention that you gave to human relations and the power of their message in that category.
Yes, the power of the message is great indeed, and it's enclosed in chapter number 5 and 6 at the end of the book, but I wanted to look at everything and bring it in to summarize it and present it to readers so that they would see what these guys finally ended up with since now they're both dead, okay? So that was another reason I wanted to do something, let me call it, for them, with what they presented to us as human beings in the measure of getting along and surviving in a world that pursues a civilization that is undergirded by good things, love included.
And their impact, what legacies, both of these men with tremendous legacies and legacies that touch us today in the way we go about, the way we should go about, our daily activities. I'll call it human brotherhood. I'll put in that under that umbrella. What other critical areas in that category did they give attention to? Because it really, when you start looking at the messages of the two, they really were well-rounded in a number of areas, weren't they?
Yes, they were. But the interesting thing, Rick, one of the interesting, Rick, that I found out was that here one was a born-again Christian who was a preacher, had gone to a seminary, and had written his thesis was in theology. And here was another man who was an agnostic. But they were both, when you look at what they wrote and what they identified as things that need to be improved amongst human beings for sanity and for existence, they hit common ground. And that's where it's fascinating looking at what the two of these guys came up with.
The book is On Freedom and Revolt, a comparative investigation by Dr. Carl Moyler, our guest on the program. Book, as I say, available at Amazon. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you'll find information there on the book. Interesting. What was the attitude of the two towards violence and war? These are sometimes considered or offered as solutions to peace. We have to fight it out before we can resolve our differences. What were their attitudes on violence and on war?
Both men believed in nonviolence. And of course, Martin Luther King was a rabid nonviolent servant,
Yes.
if you want to call it that. And Camus was the same thing. But to answer your question specifically, Mr. Bratton, for these two men, war is legalized murder. War technology costs billions of dollars to develop and maintain with untold volunteers and research. Why can't some of these billions of dollars, if not all of it, be used to address the issues of hunger and poverty? Nuclear weapons of war will lead us all to annihilation, okay, instead of human prosperity. The goal of humanity should be love, brotherhood, justice, equality, and not human destruction and affliction. War is evil, according to their interpretation of war, because it destroys human beings as well as homes, infrastructure, and leaves a civilization devastated and in ruins. So both men were against war, and concluded that violence, to answer your question, and violence leads to more violence and more destruction and human death and short lives.
Or that's a message that resonates today as we see what's happening around the world. And you said something.
Absolutely. It's terrible what's going on over there now. Unbelievable.
Yes.
I look at it and I'm ready to cry sometimes.
Well, you have to. You see families that are totally displaced, and then hear the logic behind letting these people fight over there. And it's just, we need the message now that you presented in the book on Freedom and Revolt, a comparative investigation. Said something before that's interesting. You've got an agnostic on one side, a Baptist preacher. How do they find common ground, do you think?
Well, Mr. Bratton, in investigating that and bringing together the common ground issue, one was an agnostic who didn't believe that's a person who's very skeptical about an existing God. And, of course, one God meant everything to them. So I looked at the issues of their lives, what they did. They're both brilliant scholars as far as high school on into the university is concerned. Albert Camus was born in North Africa, Algeria, and, of course, King born in the United States. But they went through very, very similar aspects as far as their livelihood and as far as their living is concerned. And even though one was not godly and the other one was very, when it came out to the things that they had to identify as problems to humanity and to civilizations, they were on the same page as far as their identification, who they were and what they stood for. And they said basically the same things as far as civilization is concerned. They were concerned about such issues as racism, tyranny, bigotry, war, Holocaust, poverty, injustice, okay? And when we came finally to where they stood, they were both standing on the same platform. So therefore, that is the way the issue is presented as far as the book is concerned. Here are two men from different cultures, different countries. One is black and one is white. But when they got down to the nitty-gritty of who they really were,
Yes.
They were talking about the same thing. And basically what they were talking about was the salvation of civilization and for us to start working together as brothers who love one another instead of hate one another. And certainly at the top of that was racism, which was in Algeria. The French went to Algeria in 1830, took away all the Arabs' belongings. They couldn't vote. They wouldn't hold a good job. They dismantled that civilization that they had for many years. And, of course, King in the United States, as he stated in his points of view, that any black man who's born in the United States goes through the same experiences. And I can say the same thing personally, myself, being a black person born in Newport News, Virginia, a southern state, okay? So we look at the same thing as far as these guys were concerned. So when you come down to the absolutes, what are the things that people really strive for? What are the things that people really need in order to coexist? And that would be the minus things of unjust treatments, non-performance as far as the civilization is concerned, the things that they're good at as far as professions and livelihood is concerned, elimination of war, elimination of racial superiority as far as saying that one person is better than another person because of the color of their skin, and they continue along those lines. And they ended up, as I said, both being evaluated as far as this book is concerned as being implementors of the same identical thing, in spite of the fact that one was a born in seminary Christian and the other one was an agnostic who didn't believe in Jesus Christ at all because he had never seen the Christians treated any better than anybody else. Christians died and they suffered and were pained in different categories as far as illnesses are concerned, whether they are Christian or not. We, as far as the Camus is concerned, it's human beings. The value of life for us to do the things that we need to do is in the hands of us living people who can see one another every day and talk to one another and all of that. While King says, I live under the auspices of a supreme being who can help me in my trials and tribulations. That is not to say I won't have some, because every Christian must bear his or her own cross. Just because I'm a Christian and a preacher and a seminary graduate, I've had my troubles too. And, of course, that's answered by him being finally assassinated.
Boy, time is going by so quickly. This is such a fascinating book on freedom and revolt, a comparative investigation by Dr. Carl Moyler, our guest on the program. And you're wondering as you read, does ethnic culture really make a difference when people share this hunger for peace and freedom? Does ethnic culture make a difference?
Oh, yes. Those were the absolutes that both Martin Luther King and Albert Camus declared were absent in too many countries and too many civilizations.
Yes.
And as far as the present day is concerned, it is too much of a case of being absent right now. We should be taught that we should have companionship, that we should have camaraderie, that we should have respect for one another as far as life is concerned, and basically that we should have agape love, that is to care about one another in camaraderie and friendship in a way that is absent in so many societies right now, considering and including also the United States. We need to get back on the words that were included in our original Constitution and Declaration of Independence: liberty and justice for all. It doesn't discriminate. They say liberty and justice for just a people of a certain race, and those of another race, we don't have any respect for them. So therefore, things end up with the race where the positive side is getting advantages and privileges, and race in the other side. In both cases, in North Africa and Algeria, the same identical thing has happened here in the United States. So you have two authors looking at the same thing happening in their country, but one from two different countries. And when you end up comparing what they have both been saying, you're on the same ground. Basically, you're saying the same thing. So I think the message there is that you don't have to be a Christian to be a good person. Look at Camus. In the last book he wrote, he was trying to resolve some of that, we believe, but we don't know because he got killed in an automobile accident and never got to finish his final book, which was named The First Man.
It's such a fascinating book, and it's available at Amazon, and you can link on by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, on Freedom and Revolt, a comparative investigation. Dr. Carl Moyler, our guest on the program. A few minutes left in the program. As you're reading through the book and talking about the book, talk about how we as Americans can profit from reading about the wisdom and the truths of these two very impressive figures. What do you hope that we as Americans take away from this comparative investigation that you've done?
Okay, Ms. Braden, I included that also in chapters 4, 5, and 6, especially chapters 5 and 6. After looking at the writings and the positions on living of these men and looking at the absolutes that they declare should be in existence in any civilization, I decided to give in 21 points, 21 issues that I identified as the recommendations that they are putting forth to us to consider and for us to follow as far as being respectful of one another, living together in peace and harmony and love, and doing what would amount to being my brother's keeper. All of that is there in the ending of the book in chapter 21 and chapter 5. It gives 21 points. And then in chapter 6, 5 and 6, also it gives 12 groups that are doing these things right now. And they are mentioned also. So in those two particular chapters is the finalization of the book in terms of what I saw they were telling us to do. 2 Nobel winners, 2 great people, one an agnostic, the other one a Christian, telling us to do the same thing. And the reason for that is because as human beings, we all look for certain things that we want to happen in our lives. And Albert Camus and Martin Luther King summarize those things in the 21 points that are at the end of the book. and also looking at those things that some organizations, just 12, there are 12 instances that are putting these things into operation. But for the 12 organizations that are doing it, I refer them back to the 21 recommendations, and where those 12 organizations are specifically doing the things from the list of 21 points of recommendation, I included that as things that they are doing by their title.
It is such a well-done book on freedom and revolt, a comparative investigation by our guest on the program, Dr. Carl Moyler. That's Moyler. Book available at Amazon, the usual places for books. You can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Also, Dr. Moyler's website, which is on freedomandrevolt.com, the name of the book, on freedomandrevolt.com. Great information on that website as well. And both of those websites, the Amazon link and Dr. Moyler's website on freedomandrevolt.com, you'll find by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can link on directly to get information. Dr. Moyler, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you so much. Congratulations on the success of the book, a very important message. Thank you for sharing it with us on the program.
And I thank you very much, too, Rick. I'm a Sunday school teacher also. I've been teaching Sunday school for almost 40 years now. And what these guys are talking about is that life is my life also. Okay, and I believe in what they said, and I believe in what I wrote. That's why I put it all together and tried to lay it out so that it would be easy to follow and to apply as far as a lifestyle operation is concerned by groups, by churches, and especially by churches, because they are highly acclaimed by Martin Luther King. By Martin Luther King now. But as far as Albert Camus is concerned, he looked at the churches in a negative way due to the way the church treated the Jews when they were sent to the concentration camps, and 6 million of them died. That was another thing that turned him against war. Hey, okay.
Well, there's so much in the book. It's a very important book. I encourage people to read it and find the message there and implement the messages you'll find in the book on Freedom and Revolt, a comparative investigation. Our guest is Dr. Carl Moyler, and you're listening to This Week in America. More on Dr. Moyler and his book on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Back on today's program after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.